I think it removes that control, that colonial control of hell, and it really puts the focus back on Jesus. Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Fractured Faith, a Mosaic Complete. It's your host, Joshua Hopping, and I have a very special kind of episode for you guys today. I'm going to be talking about indigenizing hell. That's right, indigenizing hell. The last time episode we had talked a little bit about hell and trying to unpack it and rethink it. Really was kind of designed to be an overview of a lot of different views of hell, because hell gets used so much in our Christian theology and through politics and different individuals. Really wanted to introduce you all to some different views within the Christianity, within the blanket of Christianity, that you can explore and you can think about, and really understanding that hell is not directly tied to the creeds. It's not directly tied to really the faith at all, right? It's kind of more of a secondary doctrine rather than it being a primary doctrine. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this, being able to be introduced to some different views. In this one, though, I really want to talk a little bit about re-indigenizing, or kind of a spin off of kind of decolonializing hell, which is kind of taking the colonial lens off of it from the kind of the colonies the European colonies coming over, but re-indigenizing it and bringing back the indigenous viewpoint of it. And that is really because I'm thinking about this from a Jalagi or a Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma kind of perspective, which I'm a tribal member. I grew up on the reservation in Oklahoma, and I definitely have been one of my hearts and hopes is to really kind of rethink some of our views of Jesus from a Jalagi point of view. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to really kind of stop and rethink a little bit of hell and bring back some different thoughts from the indigenous kind of Jalagi kind of viewpoint there. So hopefully this will be a fun episode to kind of think through and be a part of, even if it is dealing with a topic that's maybe not as fun or cool as hell. But that's what we're going to do. I am actually recording this on Easter Sunday, which is kind of an interesting one. And you see, I was a little late to getting this thing off. And that's actually had another episode lined up for this today that could be released. But as I was thinking about it, I really wanted to do this one in a follow up to our last episode, and being Easter Sunday, there's just something I just had to talk about hell, because there actually is a connection of hell with Easter, and that would be the harrowing of hell, which is a really great name, harrowing, right? It's like that's a really great a word coming in there, kind of this ideal. And it really is this ideal, this concept of what Jesus was doing between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. And this actually came up in a Bible study, or kind of a men's group, really wasn't Bible study, men's group on Friday. And this is where there's a group about 10 or 12 of us men that get together at 6 a.m., 6 to 7 a.m. for coffee, and we talk and we pray and we kind of process things. Really phenomenal. And yes, that is correct, 6 a.m. It is definitely early in the morning, but it is really worth your time on the place. So shout out to that crew right now, man. It is awesome. But in there, actually, the question got asked, like, well, what was Jesus doing during that time between when he was crucified on Friday and when he came out of the tomb on Sunday? And that's kind of an odd question, but it came up, and it really kind of got me thinking a little bit on this lines. But in Christianity, in Christian traditional circles, there's this concept called the harrowing of hell. And what that is really is the sense that when Jesus, when he died, he descended into the world of the dead, and he went down basically what we would say into hell to basically defeat the Satan and the devil. He took the keys of the kingdom, because he says in the gospel that he had the keys of the kingdom, and he gives them to Peter the rock, and anything that is bound on earth would be loose in heaven, and whatever's loose it would be bound. And it's just a really good passage where he's like, he has those keys, right? And the keys are the symbol of power and authority. And then you actually have it even in First Peter 4:6, and it says that this is the reason gospel preach even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to human standards in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to spirit. This is NIV. But it's ideal that Jesus in the gospel was preached to those who are now dead, which is, again, this odd thing. Like, how can the gospel preach to somebody who was dead, right? And then Ephesians 4, so that was Peter, right? Now we go to Paul. In Ephesians, he talked about how this is like kind of Ephesians 4, 7 through 10. And he's talking about, hey, like when Jesus ascended up high, took me captive, he gave gifts to his people. And then verse 9, he says, what does he ascended mean except he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So there is this concept of how Jesus went and preached to the dead on the Holy Saturday, on this day of between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. The creeds, like the Apostle Creeds or the Ephesians Creeds, they actually do kind of have that comment in there about descending into the underworld. So again, what was happening with that one? Well, to understand what that looks like, we got to go back and say, hey, what was happening of the view of the afterlife? What was the Jewish understanding of the afterlife? And even what was the kind of the Greco-Roman view of the afterlife? Because we have to remember that that Palestinian kind of Jew Israel spot where Jesus was growing up, it had about 100 years, 100, almost 200 years of Roman occupation, and then even beyond that, it had about 300 years of Greek occupation on Tonum. So we had a lot of Greek ideals, a lot of Roman ideals on it. There was temples to goddesses and gods of all up and down there in around the areas of Jesus's Jerusalem and in Galilee and everything up there. So there really was a wider kind of Greco-Roman mindset on that area. So we have to remember that we're talking about not just Hebrew, but also Greco-Roman. So we go looking about the Jewish view of the dead. Now we had this kind of Shelah view, which is kind of this almost this under kind of this after life of where it wasn't really it's not heaven as you think about pictured up in the skies, but it really this kind of this sleep or this spot where people went in this to the spot. Kind of Abraham's bosom is a way of looking at it. This is you see Jesus making reference at one of the parables where he was talking and he said, hey, there was this rich man and he had this beggar that was outside of he ignored him as he walked in and out of this house, his gate to his house, and then both the rich man and the beggar died. And then the rich man's down there. He looks across from Abraham's bosom. He sees the beggar that was being treated amazingly well, and things were not going good for him in his sleep. And he just he wanted to be able to go back and tell his family. So you have that kind of that parable of that idea of that being Abraham's bosom in this afterworld kind of spot coming in there. And or Shelah, this kind of place of rest, the kind of sleepiness, the soul sleeping has kind of been put up, which is still kind of captured in some Christians' ideal today. The really even kind of interesting thing is that the resurrection of the people really wasn't a big strong viewpoint at that time. Ezekiel talked about the dry bones coming up, and this is being resurrected as a nation, really the individuals. Though about 100 or so years before Jesus, you had the Maccabean era, and in there you actually had like a second Maccabees, I believe is the one of the books. Anyway, it was talking about this lady who had 7 sons, and she was pushing them back against these Greek emperors, so kind of pushing on them. And she actually references the individual resurrections, that they will be individually resurrected in the end at the end of the end area. So you're starting to see this kind of resurrection view coming. But for the most part, death was really this place of you just kind of died and you just kind of went, and it was just kind of ending a point. There really wasn't judgment. There wasn't torture for sure, but it was kind of this kind of sleep. You just kind of died. That was kind of predominant view coming into it that kind of Judaism had. And then if you think about the Greco-Romans and you look at Homer and their view of Hades, now Hades was the god. He was actually the brother of Zeus and the brother of Poseidon, the god of the sea, Zeus being the high god of everything. And the three of them really kind of led the revolt against their father Kronos. And then they kind of were making chances of drawing basically straws, so to speak, to find out who ruled what. Zeus kind of got to be kind of the main one, the thunderbolt, the god of the skies, and he was kind of the ruler of the upper sky world. And Poseidon ruled the oceans and the sea, and then Hades was kind of the god of the underworld. Now, being the god of the underworld, he actually ruled the dead, right? The dead coming in there. And Hades is also called Pluto, by the way, which is why by the Romans in Latin. So I have well, it used to be a planet, but bring back the planet Pluto, right? I'm old school in this one, but that's where that kind of the idea of Hades. You have a lot of those Greek gods and goddesses up there in the names of the planets. But Hades ruled the area of Hades, and there was some different views of what was happening. There's the Elysian fields. There's these avocado meadows. I'm quite sure exactly what that pronunciations of them. Not really good, but in these meadows, these areas, there's some differences of what was happening there. But for the most part, you kind of have these people living almost a life like they would above on the ground under Zeus's territory, but they were living in Hades and the underworld, where they were kind of having lives, and they were kind of living out there and farming and doing that kind of stuff, sometimes in darkness, sometimes in glowing lights, depending upon the story. There are lots of stories of visitors that would come and go from Hades and the dead. You have Hercules, for example, goes in there, does some of his different deeds. He has to be a legendary deed to come back. So there really is this kind of focus in it. Again, this is not a torture chamber. This is not nothing that was kind of horrible or painful. It was just a place that you lived after you died, and that was where you went. And so that really was kind of these Jewish and this Roman view. Again, death was just death. That was it. It didn't have you didn't have to try to earn different paths in different ways, or there wasn't a torture. You just kind of died. Now, those kind of views began to merge throughout the century. The Jewish view, the Roman views, they again merged with some of well, later on, it kind of went into a different viewpoint of merging with some of the Germanic tribes and stuff, and that's where we get the flames and tortures and the different places. That took a couple of thousand, 2,000 years, and all the different places that went there. But if we kind of go backwards, we go back to Jesus in this deal. So Jesus, I got ahead of myself there for a moment. But if we think about Jesus again, is Jesus is living in this Jewish worldview place in Galilee and in Jerusalem. There is the Greco-Roman kind of concept of Hades going around, and he dies. And Good Friday, he's crucified, and then he comes back to life on Easter. And again, we just read through Ephesians, we read through Peter's, and this idea that he went to the dead and he preached to them. He went down there, he beat up on the Satan and the evil one, and he says, you know what? I'm going to rule this. I'm going to take this back. I'm going to take and free the people from here to pull out there. Because to be in this Jewish mindset, you have to remember that death was seen as very well. The whole gospel message, the whole idea of Judaism was going back to Adam and Eve. He said, hey, I set before you two trees, right? I set before you the tree of good, the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. And so you really had this idea of the tree of life, which is life, the tree of good and evil, which is death, to eat from it surely die. And then in Moses, he even says before you, hey, here's the Mosaic covenant, choose life and follow the Mosaic covenant, or choose death and don't. Joshua had said that same thing after he came in the promised land. He's like, hey, choose life, choose death. So this idea of choosing life and choosing death is throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Judaism, this viewpoint. So that's why Paul, when we get into the first century, Paul really is this big thing saying death is the final enemy that's going to be defeated by Jesus, because it really is this sense that death is the opposite of life and the opposite of following God. Following God is life, not following God is not. So all that kind of thing coming in there, this is where it's hard sometimes to pull one point of theology or history, because it kind of everything that worldview is all tied together. But that's where Jesus is coming in and saying, you know what, I'm going to go down to the dead. I'm going to present to them the good news that I have defeated death. I have defeated the evil one. I am taking back all the stuff that was taken away from it, and I'm going to pull it up there, and I'm going to deliver them to my Father. I'm going to pull that up in there, and I'm then going to break the power of death through the resurrection. And then now he's going to break it for the rest of us, so that we stand ready in that new age of the kingdom of God, the rule and reign of God that's coming in, that death will defeat it, right? That is the harrowing of hell, the harrowing of Hades, the underworld, where Jesus came in and pulled it out, right? It's like boom, coming in there. And that is just an amazing, to me, amazing story of so much what God was doing during that period of time. when he died, he wasn't just hanging out, in a sleep somewhere. No, he was going down and just whapping up Lucifer and just taking back the kings, pulling his people out, saying, "No, these people come with me." That is just powerful. Now, if we want to put a pin in that for a moment, I want to kind of take you look at the Cherokee or the Jollagee kind of viewpoint. Now, the story of the Cherokees and their view of kind of the afterlife is a little bit hard to kind of piece together. Again, we've had several hundred years now, about 400 years of forced genocide. We had forced genocide and enculturation and lots of different things happening onto them. We were colonized by the European, mostly kind of English and Europe's and the United States, just like Israel was colonized by the Romans. And so there's definitely, in the Greeks. So there's definitely some parallels we have in there. So within that, some of our stories got lost. But there's one big story about the afterlife that really is told, and this continues to be told to this day. And I've actually told this story to my boys as well. And the story is about the daughter of the sun. And what did this I kind of won't go through all of it, be here too long, but in kind of a shortened version is the sun was burning up the people. She was too close to the earth. It was really, really hot. So the Cherokees, Jolligees wanted to kind of go up there and try to get the sun to stop burning things down, right? And they had talked to the little people and the conjurers to find out how to do it. And they said, we'll turn you into a snake and we'll go up there and be able to kind of help get the sun to stop burning us up. So they actually turn a couple of Cherokee men into snakes, and one of them goes up and was at the door of the daughter of the sun's house, because the sun went across the sky every day and stopped at the noon, basically, and visited her son before then continuing the journey across the sky vault. Well, as the snake was curled up waiting to be for the sun to show up, he got scared and reached out and bit the first being basically that walked past, which was the daughter of the sun coming to her house, and she died and went to the west, which is kind of the area of death. And the sun got so mad, and it just really started burning even hotter than everything before, because she was very, very sad and very sorrow because her daughter had died. So then the Jolly Geese said, well, this is not good. We're actually worse off now than we were before. What are we going to do? So then the little people said, well, go ahead and go out to the west, take 7 sticks from 7 different trees and go around, and you'll find the daughter of the sun dancing around, and you tap her on the shoulder once with each of the 7 sticks, and then take her, put her in a basket, and bring her back, but make sure you don't open the basket. So the people, they went and they did. They go off to the west and they journeyed day in and day out until they got to the spot. And there they found the daughter's son doing a stomp dance around the fire. And all their families and relatives were there and living their life basically like they would be back home in the land of their ancestors, or where God had put them there. So they're like, wow, this is pretty amazing. But then they saw the daughter of the sun. So then they did. They tapped, the shoulder once at a time. And then she fell down. They put her in this big basket, put the lid in there, and they went. And along the way there, they heard all this racketing, all this different screaming and stuff. And that they, first they ignoring it. And then finally one person like kind of cracked open the lids a little bit, and all of a sudden this red bird flies right out of the cage, out of the basket, and flies up there. And the daughter's son escapes and goes off and becomes red bird, which we now see is the cardinal. Now, so that's kind of a short version of coming in there. And with that, you kind of see some different themes coming out. One is you see that as the Cherokee men went to the west, there's a certain place where the kind of the afterworld world was, and that they found the relatives, they found everybody there, and they were living that way, just kind of like they would be back at their regular homes back in the Carolinas and Georgia and Virginia. There was this ideal that death didn't really mean this the end of the end. It just means you go to a different kind of frame of being, and to the spiritual world or into this other world, and you live there, right? There's a sense that you can then somehow go there and actually get return at least the daughter or son out of it. They were unable to bring any of their family members out, but they brought the daughter or son out. Granted, they messed up and let her out of the basket and everything got crazy. And I guess I should finish the story in that eventually they do get the sun to stop burning up, and they got rain back, and so things actually kind of worked out good for them. but they definitely blunder around in doing that. So as we think about those concepts, which is again, it's kind of similar to the ancient Romans or even the ancient Hebrew deals, in that the afterworld, this ideal of quote unquote hell or Hades or Sheol or Abraham bosom, whatever else, was this concept that when people died, they went to it and there was kind of a life there, and it may not have been exactly happy, but it wasn't really bad either, right? There is a sense that you lived life onward, even afterward, like you did in this kind of world. And so, with those viewpoints, I'm going to kind of shift a little bit here. Is like, if we go back and think about how can we re-indigenize hell, or how can we remove hell, and from my last episode, this is where I definitely lean towards Christian universalism, sometimes annihilationism, depending upon the day of the week, but I definitely lean more and more so to Christian universalism, which is the idea that through the actions of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, that all knee shall bow and that all of creation and all humanity will be drawn into them, right? And that through him, all people will come to know the Father, and balance or he will be restored, balance and harmony will be restored in that deal. And that I find there's some great biblical places to that one. I think from a position of who Jesus is, it fits really beautifully as well, because it also doesn't mean that it does still mean we need to go out and actually tell people about Jesus, because Jesus affects how we live today, right now, not just what happens in the afterlife. And that, but even if we go to some of the other views of like annihilations or even the void, any of those things, it really does help remove that power, that colonial power of hell, because hell has become such a colonial kind of way of controlling people. It really is saying, like, well, if you don't follow us, you're going to go to hell. You're going to go into this burning, torturing deal if you don't follow our beliefs or have our doctrine or our viewpoint. And it's hell is used as a very controlling, very colonial view of the happening. And what's crazy again is the fact that hell is the view that we have of hell right now with Christianity isn't really even the view, the Hebrew view, or even the Roman view. Is this whole new thing again that kind of got created up primarily in Europe over different cultures and different things happening to it, kind of developed into this kind of torture chamber. And by removing that and re-indigenizing it and really kind of going back to the indigenous people of the Hebrew, or even into the indigenous people of the Romans, of this ideal of Hades, or I would say the Jalagi, were the sense that, into the West there was, the living in the areas. I think it removes that control, that colonial control of hell, and it really puts the focus back on Jesus, that focus back on, well, why should we follow Jesus? And he did die to save us. He did die to be able to restore balance and harmony to us. And I won't deny that. And I think even removing hell actually frees us up to really find Jesus, right? It really frees us up to really be able to see Jesus, so that we're following Jesus out of this sense of love and passion, not as somebody out of fear, right? We follow him because we want to follow him. We see the goodness in him. We see the love in him. We see the fact that he is wooing us to it, that he has brought balance and peace and harmony to us. That is why we follow him, not because we're afraid, not because he brings this sort of fear to us that we have to somehow tremble and be able to actually follow him, because then we're going to go burn in the afterlife. I'm like, that is not, it's like the wrong picture, right? That's not the picture we see in the Gospels. In fact, fear is what Rome did, right? Actually, it's like, Caesar Augustus was called the son of a god, son of Julius Caesar. He brought fear. He's like, follow me, I want to cut you off, right? Jesus is actually the upside down kingdom in bringing that love and compassion to it. And here I'm going to start preaching to you guys coming on here, but it's so important. It's like, let's follow Jesus because we love Jesus, not because we're afraid of hell. Now, if we think about it, I'm just going to keep on riffing off that, is indigenizing this. And you think of it from a Jalagi point of view, is that if Jesus came and it came down, he came here and he's like, hey, I'm going to come here to the people of the Jalagi. and I'm going to go into the West, and I'm going to do what our forefathers could not do. See, so when we went, our forefathers went into there, we actually were only able to bring back the daughter of the son. And again, we messed that up even as we're getting back by letting the basket out. But Jesus can go into the West. Jesus can go where we cannot go. And he cannot just bring back one person. He could bring back all of everyone. Bring back our people, right? And preach to them the good news, the gospel message that the creator of God that was distant, the creator that created heavens and earth, the one that was up and that made us and that had originally had harmony and balance and Tohi all around us. But for some reason, we had lost contact with that creator. We knew the creator. We knew that the creator was there. We were worshiping other gods and goddesses. We weren't worshiping the trees. We weren't worshiping these animals. Yeah, we had other spiritual beings in the land. And yes, we had our brothers and sisters of the trees and the rocks and stuff, but they were not our gods. We weren't worshiping them. We knew that there was a creator. If you read any of the materials going back to contact, even to what the Europeans said from the 1600s onward, you'll see that we had a creator, and we always knew we had a creator, but we did not know how to approach that creator. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus came to be able to really be able to bring that harmony and that balance back, and to really bring us back in connection to the Nedohi, so we could have that personal relationship with, which is awesome. He then went into the West, and he went into that place there, and he brought back our people. He brought back our folks and said, hey, come on, I will bring harmony and balance from you, and bring that back into it. And yes, I understand again that Cherokee view death a little bit differently. It's not as painful, in like horrible sometimes that some cultures have, but there's still this sense that we know what it's like to have pain. We know what it is to have death, right? And there's a sense that even if we see the rhythm of death in the family, even though we see it in nature and places, there's still a pain attached to it. There's still a pain attached to it. And this is where, when Jesus is able to go to the West and harrow out the West in the darkened land of the darkening, and bring back our loved ones and say, hey, I'm going to resurrect you. I'm going to bring you back into it. I'm going to share with you, that you can have that restored balance and harmony with you, Nedohi, the Father. Wow. That's a view I can get behind. That's a reindigenizing the view of Creator sets free, or Jesus, to be able to say, yeah, our Creator has set you free, and come into it and comes out. And then there's a sense also of where, as Native Americans, is we know genocide. We know incarcerations. Even to this day, we're still fighting the things of it means to be forced, and of acculturations, and being told that our viewpoints and our people are wrong or demonic or all this stuff. We see the trauma and the death, and we see the pain that happens with our bodies. And Jesus goes into our hell. He goes into our hell. He goes into our Hades, into our darking lands individually, just as he does corporately. He walks into that area and he's like, I'm here. I'm here. Perfect love casts out all fear. I have gone into the land there for you, to be able to bring that balance and harmony back, to bring healing into those, right? It is, I was thinking about the vulture, and the vulture being the great healer, right? He heals the land. It's like, yes, Jesus is the great vulture, right? He's coming in, he's going, and he's just rooting out the evil and the sin and the junk and the pain, and he's bringing back healing into the land, right? He's like, which is, I don't know, it fits within. If you're not a Jellicky, I'm sorry, it's a longer story, but it's just like Jesus, a great vulture, right? But there's a sense of being able to have that joy and that pain coming into it, because he comes in. And this is where in the book of Hebrews it says that we have a high priest that knows what it's like in every area of our life, every struggle. He knows what it's like. So we serve a creator that's so passionate love for us that he came down and be able to say, hey, I am going to live my life with you, that I'm going to break down the boundaries and the unbalance and the different struggles, that barriers that was built up between me and you for different ways and different reasons. That's, another story to be able to talk about how that barriers got there. But I'm going to tear them down. I'm going to bring healing. I'm going to be the great vulture, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to herald death, and I'm going to heal death, and I'm going to take away death, and I'm going to bring us back. But rather than just having us escape out of the basket and blubbering it up and having problems, it's a rejoicing back, and it's this great stomp dance with all the people and all of our ancestors around us. And we get to see our loved ones, and we get to chant our songs, and we get to dance our dances, and we get to blow our smoke and beat our drums and sing our flutes. And it's like, this is, the Jolly Gee of heaven, right? This is a time where we get to be fully Jolly Gees and everything else. That way, the voice and the language of the Jolly Gee is heard before the throne room of God, to kind of combine those two different things there with the Hebraic understanding. That's the herring of hell. That is the reindigenizations of hell. Gone is the power and control that the colonial views want to use of this one. We no longer have to be afraid of that, because Jesus has already went to the darkening lands, and he's already came back. Oh, amen to that one, right? Woo! I'll give a shout out for it. That is what I'm going to share with you guys today. So thank you guys again, Widow, for hanging out with me. Thank you again for liking and subscribing this podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Share it with somebody else as we kind of talk through and rethink and really look at the wider umbrella of Christianity from all its viewpoints. Because Jesus, and that He, Creator set free, is bigger than any one of us. So, Widow, thank you again. And Donna Daga Ai. Until we meet again.